there's probably not going to be a point to restoring lost ecosystems if we cannot protect what we have in the first place. So today's talk is going to be about extending that protection to a certain new category of ecosystems that sometimes seem to get overlooked in mainstream conservation. Um, we're talking about ecosystems with new assemblages of plants, with a different set of initial conditions that they're starting out with. Ecosystems where we cannot discount human influence, whether that's for the better or for worse. And so today's talk is probably going to challenge some of the conservation paradigms that we have and operate with. And in fact, it may ask us to expand our ideas of what an ecosystem is, even. And if you're wondering, it is important to ask these questions, these larger questions, because it determines which ecosystems are ultimately conserved and which ones are sacrificed. It also determines who has access to ecosystem services and who doesn't. And it shows us what we stand to lose if we don't even recognize it. And so what we are going to witness now is an exchange of these ideas between a young conservationist on one hand and a wise and experienced one on the other. And which brings me to our speakers for today. Nirjesh Gautam is an independent researcher and writer. He explores interactions between human beings and nature. Nirjesh also studies and documents urban biodiversity, and specifically, he studies the emergence of these new or novel ecosystems in cities. Besides this, Nirjesh has also been fighting to get one such ecosystem recognition. This ecosystem is the Dwarka Forest in Delhi, and he's been fighting for it in court to get it recognized and protected. And in addition to this, he seeks to make ecological thinking and solutions more accessible to audiences through science communication. Our other speaker is Suprabha Seshan. Those of you who've joined us before on our invasive species webinars would remember Suprabha. She is a rainforest conservationist and heads the Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary in Kerala. The sanctuary is a collectively owned reserve where Suprabha and her team work on plant conservation and habitat restoration. Suprabha also works on nature education and ecological advocacy. And I think one of her defining qualities has been that she's constantly exploring how decisions that affect landscapes, how these decisions arise out of social, ecological, and political frameworks. And with this, I'd like to invite both Suprabha and Nirjesh to enlighten us with their ideas today. Suprabha, over to you.
Good evening. Thanks, Mandeep, so much for that intro. And Nirjesh, I've really enjoyed our conversations, and I'm excited about the prospect of expanding our discussion circle with this session. I spend, along with my friends, an unreasonable amount of time looking at things that most people walk past, including, and I'm talking also of my friends, that we all look at different things. So we are all drawn to different aspects of the natural world, of the world. And I get excited, for instance, by a patch of moss creeping over compacted soil. So that to me is like a really exciting happening. Or a small sporophyte of a fern appearing inside an overgrown tea plantation, where there wasn't one last monsoon, perhaps, or a seedling poking through a crack in an old wall, or a posse of seedlings appearing on the roof of old buildings and balconies. And there's a disproportionate excitement around these events, and I've been wondering why. It's like this is major news in my life. But I've also realized it's sort of like what life has been doing for hundreds of millions of years. And despite everything that we have thrown at life in all this time that particularly human industrial civilization has been around, that's not canceled out. We being, people who are interested in nature in a very direct way, perhaps, of conserving it, we tend to imagine that nature lives in protected areas, in national parks, in wildlife refuges that we have created. But as I've been discovering, and I think this is going to be, what we see with Nirjesh's presentation, that nature has other ideas. And it turns up in all sorts of places, in railway sidings, in, abandoned quarries, in roadside drains, in construction rubble, and really inconvenient places where we have to deliberate on what it is. And it has a talent for appearing where it's been uninvited. It's not welcome. On another occasion, perhaps we can debate on the word nature itself. It seems to be getting a lot of press coverage. What is nature? Is it different? It's the terminology is getting very philosophical and political and linguistic. But I think we understand what we mean, what I mean here. And what I'm concerned about is that there's a kind of a space, and this space can be beloved to somebody, but it has no status in the dominant worldview. It has no entry in the forest department's records. It has no legal categories that protect it. It is land that residents, activists, or just people like myself, we just love it for some reason. And there's one patch in Delhi, 275 acres, I think, from what I understand, behind Delhi's international airport, where for 4 decades it's been quietly becoming a forest that nobody planned. And it's got a name, it's Dwarka Forest. And long before anyone started to recognize it, it's sort of been happening on its own. So for me, the particular pleasure of this webinar is, and it's an unexpected one, that, oh, here's a kindred soul. And, Mandeep just introduced us, and we have this exciting discussion now. And, I've spent a lifetime along with my friends at the Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary, and we're peering into rainforests. We're looking up canopies. We're crawling around on the forest floor. We're getting excited about mosses and ferns and orchids and so on. These improbable, shy lives of plants that most people don't notice. And we've given our lives to conserving them, protecting them. But there's no doubt that they're conserving us and giving us a life. Nirjesh, meanwhile, has been paying attention to plants along highways and forgotten scraps of land over landfills, beside railway lines and on rooftops. And he's saying something similar. People and plants giving each other possibilities, protection, and inspiration. And so we've seemed to have arrived from opposite directions, the center of a city and the edge of an old rainforest, to at a similar fascination, this determination of life to explore possibilities. So I think what I find is that Nirjesh is inviting us into an act of attention in a different landscape, to a place, in a place that he loves. And I would like to hand it over to him, and that while we're listening, that we perhaps just suspend for a while our immediate urge to classify landscapes as natural or artificial, native or not native, old or new even. And it seems that at the heart of what I've understood from Nirjesh is just a simple question: what the heck is life doing here? You know? So thank you, Nirjesh. Looking forward. Take it from here.
Thank you, Suprabha, for such a wonderful introduction to the webinar and to ourselves. And just a bit of clarification, Mandeep. So this saving of this forest and this legal case is being done by Naveen Solanki, and I was part of their team. So I was an ecological advisor. So I think that it is very important to highlight Naveen Solanki and Save Dwarka Forest movement. And we'll start this conversation. I'll just share my screen and start the presentation. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorted. And the slides are moving as well. So, I welcome you all for today's webinar. I am a student and researcher of urban ecology, and I'm quite interested in observing and writing about the stories of adaptability and survivability of human and non-human species in the nooks and corners of NCT of Delhi. Well, my friends, the Delhi, the city, the holds a very important place in my life, and it has shaped me in various ways. And it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't just me who was being shaped. I was also shaping the my Delhi. So, for instance, Delhi provided me education, it provided me love, it food, leisure, and everything. It colored my life through flamingos, through red avadavats and teals, and I colored its sky gray and blackened its rivers. Delhi provided me one of the oldest mountain ranges, my friends, and I provided it newest mountain ranges through my consumption in the form of landfill sites. So now, as I inherit Delhi, I inherit both the colors and the discoloration. I inherit satisfying biotic and abiotic, but I also inherit the prevalent and persistent sufferings of all beings. With this position, I study, I observe, and I read about Delhi. I write about Delhi to further the imagination and the cause of a just Delhi. So today, I'll be talking about something that Delhi gave me. A forest, a spontaneous forest through that developed through its own agency, a novel ecosystem, I must say. So a novel ecosystem is an interactive system of abiotic, biotic, and social components that, by virtue of human influence, differ from those that prevailed historically, having a tendency of to self-organize and manifest novel qualities without intensive human management. So for this webinar, I have divided this conversation into two parts. I'll first talk about how nature expresses itself in the city. And finally, I'll discuss about different sort of ecologies, and not ecology to be particular, different ecologies, the pluralities that remain usually under acknowledged within these spaces. But first, I would like to put forth the rationale behind this idea of novel nature or new sort of nature. Well, this is an image of global nighttime light change between 2014 and 2022. So prior to human beings on Earth, everything evolved through the flux of light and dark. Within a very short span of times, ever since industrialization, we have installed lights throughout the planet and used very little of it, and most of it escaped in the form of pollution. These researchers have found that global radiance increased by 34% during the 8-year study period. Now, this graphic illustrates about the planetary boundaries, the safe operating space of humanity. The section within the green zone can be understood as Earth's capacity to heal itself, beyond which is a high risk zone in terms of Earth's incapacity to heal itself. Now, the industrial processes has led to exorbitant amount of carbon dioxide in the environment. There is a rise of more than 30% in the atmospheric levels of carbon since ever since pre-industrial era. The biogeochemical flows or cycles has also been influenced. Imagine we who did not evolve to fix nitrogen in the soil fixes 60% of it, surpassing the symbiotic work of our bacterial and leguminous friends. We are also a largest source of oxidized sulfur gases in the atmosphere, which affect regional air quality, biogeochemistry, and climate. Moreover, mining and mobilization of phosphorus and of metals exceed their natural flows. Some of the metals that are concentrated and mobilized are highly toxic in nature. Furthermore, we have added novel entities in the atmosphere in the form of industrial compounds such as PCBs and persistent and volatile chlorofluorocarbons. And beyond any doubt, I must say, humanity has become a major biogeochemical force on Earth. And congratulations, my friends. I must not shy away from congratulating us that we have recently acidified our oceans and pushed it into a risk zone. So we have changed environmental conditions throughout the planet. Whether it is climate change, integrity of biosphere, everything is compromised. Adding all this, it is quite reasonable to say that humans have dominated most of the planetary processes, and thus so many studies suggest that human beings have given a way for a new sort of nature, since whole environmental composition ingredients have changed completely. Now, when we scale it down to a city level, we see the amount of changes we do in terms of local climate, biotic and abiotic factors, land use change, and so on. For instance, this graphic of Berlin city illustrates it well. Notice the impact of air pollution and air circulation in the climate section of the diagram. See the extent of such changes, which extend far beyond the main city. Then the extent of eutrophication, soil compression, effects in level of groundwater beyond the core zone of well. All these factors have bearing on the flora and fauna of the concerned space, and irrespective of all these changes, nature finds a way to express itself in the city. So this is a very beautiful image. This is an image that I clicked while traveling in metro. I have been using this image to highlight the agency of plant movements. This is an abandoned government quarter somewhere near Rithala, and notice the floral species, grasses, and herbs. And these were not planted by anyone. They brought themselves here, established themselves, and every year post monsoon, you will see the same beautiful scenario on this roof. Now, this is a road divider from a sewage drain in North Campus. Notice the grass, which has established itself and provide habitat to various insect species. Now, this is a image of a sewage drain in North Campus. Notice the grass, and it has established itself on its own. And see, it has become sort of feeding habitat for moor hens and swamp hens. This image is from Bhalswa landfill site. These beautiful Naltama juliflora trees in the bottom of the image and grasses have brought themselves here and now interacting with these cows. Now this image is from the site that we were talking about, the Dwarka Forest. Notice the construction debris on the left side and the plants around it. These plants are acting on this abiotic element and it will change it. For instance, in the background, you see a mound, and there's this Prosopis juliflora, Naltama juliflora tree, and and beneath it is all construction material. This is a broad image of the same landscape. In the center, you will see construction waste, and this whole vegetation we see in the background, in the foreground, is on construction waste itself, derived construction derived substrates, and no one planted these trees here. Now, this Google imagery shows the landscape in 2009. This is from the same landscape, Dwarka Forest only. And notice this tree line, if you can see the arrow on the slide, these are shisham and eucalyptus plantations. And these three trees are babul trees, as what Naveen says. So now notice in 2017 image, these are Google Earth imagery images. And in this image, see the vegetation, growth of vegetation and from the past 2009 image. And finally in 2022, see a lush green forest have come itself. Now, this site before 1980s actually was used for agricultural purposes, and later is what it was earmarked for planned development of Delhi. And during 2008, it was given to Railway Ministry for the construction of a railway station. There, it's called Bijwasan Railway Station. And now, within these 3-4 decades, the land was utilized for dumping of construction waste material, and at the same time natural processes were also acting on it, such as succession and colonization by animals, and this completely changed the face of the forest completely. Now, well, the ecosystems in urban spaces are not just limited to abiotic and biotic factors only. Urban processes, or what's called anthroposphere, altered soil, climate, and water conditions, they have corresponding impact on the type of vegetation that will occur in that particular area. For instance, in this landscape, the legacy pesticides used and the agricultural plantings directly affect the pedosphere, the soil, which have a bearing on what plants will take over. And that's why we see a lot of babul and shisham trees throughout the Dwarka forest. So the interaction of geosphere, biosphere, and anthroposphere give us urban green spaces like such. Beautiful, isn't it? And there are around 3 or 4 water bodies in Dwarka Forest. So this is one of the water bodies. Now, this is also a very impressive image I clicked when I visited Dwarka Forest with Naveen for the very first time. In this image, you can see that I, Naveen, and this Nil guy is a Schedule 2 mammal species, and it is a it is state animal of Delhi. So we all were checking out each other, and notice it is concealing behind a rubble mound, and uh, this is what urban nature is. So very different sort of ecologies emerge here. So first is quite ecological and very sciencey, scientific sort of thing, and I call it non-native native urban forest, which is adapted to urban impacts. It's resilient, it's self-sustainable, have high biodiversity, and provide refuge for urban wildlife. And in terms of ecological services, it provides hydrological recharge, reduces urban flooding, sequesters carbon, and there is hardly any cost involved in this whole development of this forest. This leads us to the idea of novel ecosystem. So, no, that emerge through both intentional and unintentional human interventions, and they provide ecosystem services and are legitimate targets for environmental protection, and they sustains human nature relationships in cities as well. Now, such relationships in India, particularly in India, are not studied in the perspective of marginalized communities. This sort of ecology is what I call urban forests entangled with marginalized communities. This is the map of Dwarka Forest. The people living in the edge of the forest in the green boundary were settled here around 1980s. These were approximately 257 families which were relocated here under urban development policies. And notice the informal paths in blue color. So these informal paths, they serve as everyday shortcuts for women and men commuting to work in the sectoral societies of Dwarka. Some households also depend on the forest for limited fuel wood collection, leaf harvesting, while others graze goats and buffaloes in certain areas of the forest. Some women regularly enter the forest to feed stray dogs and ensure water provisions during lean seasons for nilgai. Without the forest, residents would experience extreme heat, air pollution, and persistent noise far more intensely given its proximity to airport. In this sense, Dwarka Forest provides a environmental protection that cannot be purchased. It compensates through, though only partially, for structural inequalities in housing, infrastructure, and access to environmental comfort. Its true significance lies not only in ecology or what it offers to Delhi as a whole, but in how it sustains those who live within or around the forest and depend on it the most. While working with Save Dwarka Forest movement led by Naveen Solanki, which was trying legal means to save the forest, I realized that there are a lot of complexities in recognizing these spaces. As Dwarka Forest doesn't find itself as a forest in the government records, which is a necessary condition for a piece of land to be called as a forest. Mm, furthermore, Dwarka Forest also sits uneasily at this intersection of Supreme Court's emphasis on evaluating forests in terms of past land use, present ecological conditions, and future use when determining the legal status of forest land. For Dwarka Forest, past land use was agricultural, future use was for the development of railways. So its present ecological condition is not really important. Yeah, so it gets very difficult when, because the legal idea of forest is very different, and these sort of landscapes have a very uh, new sort of assemblages, and these are not understood yet. So, moreover, while this case was happening in the Supreme Court NGT, while the case was happening in the the Supreme Court for this case asserted that subsequent natural growth of vegetation, no matter how dense it is, cannot override the pre-existing land use, a ruling that threatens protection of urban forests that arise spontaneously. The judgment also reinforces a static understanding of what constitutes a forest. This privileges naturally evolved indigenous ecosystems, and if if this decision is applied rigidly, this could render ecological functional areas such as Delhi Ridge vulnerable, not because they lack ecological value, but because they do not conform to an idealized notion of native nature. Also, the ideas of new forest or novel ecosystems is quite new in itself, and our conservation and restoration ideas, which are quite discursive and do not acknowledge this form of spontaneous nature. Given these theoretical gaps and perhaps our conventional ideas of nature, therefore in the parlance of law such ideas are never addressed. However, this concept has gained prominence, particularly in the global north, as a way of understanding urban nature shaped by altered microclimates, elevated pollution levels, modified soil composition, and transformed hydrological conditions. So, in urban spaces, very different sort of ecologies and ecological interactions emanate, and they have a lot of bearing on the lives of people, particularly those who live beside it and who are not considered in the policy making. So this leads us to the question about for whom is this nature for? Is this nature for native flora, for charismatic species, for migratory birds, for a fortified management, or for the people who are dependent on it, as it as it provides climatic relief to them? There is also a question of whether the management of such spaces reproduce inequalities in some form. So I conclude this webinar by this wonderful quote by Adolf Gottlieb. Certain people always say we should go back to nature. I notice they never say we should go forward to nature. It seems to me they are more concerned that we should go back than about the nature, unquote. Also, people last month, we have lost the case of saving Dwarka Forest completely from the ecological tyranny of our Honorable Supreme Court. Now trees are being cut and machines are coming, Nilgai is running, and this year winter migratory birds not coming. So in order to let our beloved forest live, I, with the help of Naveen and my colleagues, Merlin Maria, Anthony, and Shruti Raghavan, we have compiled an extensive report about this forest, and this can be accessed through Visco. The acknowledgement, thank you. Over to you, Mandeep.
I think thanks a lot, Nirjesh, for putting your points across so succinctly. I think we can segue into discussion with Suprabha now and eventually open it up to the audience for questions.
Yeah, perfect.
Suprabha, you're on mute, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah. I've heard you now a couple of times and read your report, and I'm struck by how pretty much all the aspects of what's understood to be restoration, ecology, or conservation with justice in mind, how so much of this is coming together, along with a philosophical, and we're really asking this question: how do you define a forest, and who gets to define it as a forest? And I feel that this is the reason why I really wanted to do this webinar, is because we need to address it in all these ways. What I thought, for the purpose of a discussion between us, a short one before we open it out, there's a couple of things, like today, for instance, there was an article in, I think, Mongabe, and so there's this whole thing about Miyawaki, but the question that is being asked is, what exactly are we trying to achieve? This was in the context of Miyawaki. And that restoration needs to be adapted to local ecology. and a staggered planting and an understanding of water constraints and so on. So then here you are in this presentation, and also from many observations that I have myself made, and I think other people are also asking these days. There's I felt like what Dwarka is asking is an even more radical question, not what should we do or what exactly are we trying to achieve. And it's not asking us what should we plant, but it is actually, there's this question of what is the landscape already trying to do? There is something underway. And this something underway has a long history. You've described the process of the agroecological shift to, to what it is today and all the different stages in between. Had Dwarka forest been a restoration project back then, would we ever have planted what has actually emerged there today, which is this incredible combination of native and exotic and birds and migratory birds and little plants and a water body and so on. So there's all these things that the restoration community is grappling with. This is good and this is not good, and all that. And meanwhile, there's this thing that is happening, and it is good. It is good by all the members of that particular community, but it is also playing such a vital role in that area, in that little region. So I just wondered whether you want to talk about that, because the very word that you have used, spontaneous, I mean, that's really what is so striking about this, that this whole thing is happened on its own. And so I want you to make it a little bit personal as to what drew you into using that word, into seeing that in you and Naveen and your friends. Like, what is that for you?
I'll talk about Naveen first. So when I first met Naveen, so Naveen have been fighting for this case for a very long time, and he had very bad nights for these 4 or 5 years until we really finally lost. So Naveen has a very childhood memory of the forest. So he first came to the forest for the very first time when he was a child, and he have been observing this forest for a very long time, and suddenly it started people started destroying it ever since, like, this construction activities started to begin. Then so there was this fear in Naveen, because he have been looking at the forest. He was watching migratory birds there, and that was a very nice sort of natural space to go out, hang out with friends. So, uh, so this memory was very strong in Naveen. Whenever I talk to Naveen, and he talks about this childhood memory, and this memory uh, has become so strong part in him that his whole life has been gone into saving this forest. So, and but this thing is with the proximity of Naveen. Naveen have been living at this place for a very long time, ever since his childhood. And I met Naveen around 3 4 years back. So when I went to that space, I saw Neil guys. Matlab, like, I ever since childhood, I have been living in cities, and I have been watching nature in cities only. And most of the nature that I have, very impressive nature that I have seen, was in Delhi itself. So uh, I have been to many restoration sites in Delhi, and I also worked in one of the restoration sites in Delhi. But this sort of nature, when there is the agency of nature itself, there is no involvement of human. It's not. I'm not saying that human involvement should not be there, but the development of nature. Because see, the local. What are the local environmental conditions? So, whatever the local environmental conditions were, plants found that sort of opportunities, and they grow themselves. And imagine, nobody relocated Neil guys. Neil guys came on their own, because Dwarka Forest is not only one forest, there are lots of forests. And And these nilgai and these all patches of these all neglected lands, they have these forest sort of things. And when they are being cut, so nilgais run away and they try to figure out different sort of habitats. So nilgais came on their own. So I think this is something that is given to us, which we do not want to see. And when I was looking at it, and because I was also linked to environmental management in some sort, then I was realizing there is lot of money involved in these projects, these restoration projects, and it is very persistent. You keep on restoring, there is no end. But this landscape is something like, see, I have a present for you. Look, do you want to see it? So I see it that way, and then I started exploring it more. And we also conduct so many walks there. We take people for bird watching and tree walking, and we also do various sort of activities with people to introduce such landscapes. So my relationship of this forest is a relationship of my childhood in cities actually. I've been in cities and I've always seen nature in cities, city and nature, nature and city. And even in Delhi, I have seen such landscapes, such wonderful landscapes which are not valued at all. And they have a lot of like Najafgarh Lake. Take example of Najafgarh Lake. There are like more than 250 bird species that come every year. And this landscape, this wetland is full of sewage and industrial waste. Sahibi River is full of polluted city process material, but still nature finds a way. So I really like this thing that nature itself produces its ways to live. So this is how I am very much connected to this space.
Yeah, what you're saying just now makes me think of, all the stuff that modern civilization is throwing at the natural world, and it's coming up with all these interesting possibilities. And, the Anthropocene is a game changer with the novel entities that you talked about. I've been looking at the effect of the Green Revolution a little bit because just the sheer dumping of urea on the landscape, some 60 million tons of urea per annum is thrown onto the landscape. And then, there's millions and millions of bore wells, this ancient waters taken from deep below and then made available on a daily basis at surface level, which means that you're basically providing rain at this surface level every day. And then you expect this kind of, older vegetation to come. Meanwhile, it's got, the beings that turn up there because the hydrospheres change, the geospheres change, the chemicals have changed. They have sort of taken matters into their own hands because they can live there, and they also make way in time for other beings. So I think that is this process of 40 years, and where you that visual that you had of this brown land, and then earth. Actually, I don't even know if there was soil there at that point. It seemed to have just been an exposed area. And then what you see today. So there is change over time, and just by letting it be, this amazing thing has happened. The other thing I was thinking of was, is it a commons? Is that an appropriate word for it? And today there was another Rain Matter social media post, Rain Matter Foundation, which is that looking at, commons as parks and lakes and, forests, and that they belong to everyone. And then, but then the question is, what really counts as a commons? And so, what about that abandoned railway side, on one side of your picture? What about the fact that there is a spontaneous woodland besides the airport? Do they become commons only when we recognize them? Like it's and who is it for? Who is it a commons for? So the language is usually about people, but these places are being continuously made by plants and fungi and microbes and birds and so on. And they're not exactly ownerless. They are actually very rich in relationships, but privilege blinds us to, the richness of this world. And I think, so I was just wondering about that, like who is feeling connected and vested in this area.
Been- So like I have been studying this area for some time, and I have had a lot of conversation with the localites in the that community there that was shifted there, and also from Naveen Solanki comes from a village called Shahabad Mohammadpur. Then we also had conversations in that place, and so people had very deep bonds related to that area, not just the like privilegers always see these spaces as for bird watching exercises or something like that, or maybe for ecosystem services they provide. But for localites, it's a very different idea. See, imagine uh, in 43-degree heat, a woman is going to some household like ours to cook food, and there is a respite there for her because they also spend these timings there. And when we talk about parks in Delhi have certain restrictions. You cannot go in there in the night, and some parks all only functions during morning and evening. So I don't think there is no idea of common in those because they have lots of restrictions. You cannot pluck fruits from there. So in Dwarka Forest, we have seen children plucking jungle jalebi ke fruits. So that sort of is a common sort of thing which I see more productive, and people see take this landscape as that way. But so I think. We define commons in a very different way, but commons act in a very different way. And these spaces that are abandoned, so they do not have any restriction. They are open access, right? You can go whenever you want bale key leaves, you can go and pluck them. But in the park, you cannot go and claim that because there will be a guard who will be like shooing you away, something like that. So I think people are quite entangled with this landscape because of one thing, it has direct utility, and see, it's not that we all people cook our food on gas. Gas is pretty expensive, and most lot of people coming from marginalized communities they extract timber to cook their food. So these spaces become those sites where they can get these things. And these are very difficult sort of questions. Ki there is an air pollution, then someone will say these people are doing air pollution. But what else they have to do because they do not have that sort of privilege to use clean fuel or something like that. So these things are very important, and also some things, few things that people do not directly recognize because they have hunger of food. They do not have hunger of something else. So they do not acknowledge that this particular sort of landscape or forest, Dwarka forest particularly, provides a climatic buffer to them because they are quite busy to think about these arguments. They do not have time to do this. They are always working for the city, for city processes. So I think that this restricted less commons is sort of very nice where in Dwarka forest I see that people have quite entangled. Even in
Yeah,
Najafgarh,
I felt, yeah, go ahead.
so even in Najafgarh Lake, you will see a lot of fishing there. So people do fishing there, and in Najafgarh Lake area. So when there is less water, so there are already agricultural fields of people inside that water. So when water recedes, people get back to their agricultural lands. But the restoration idea would be there to like these people should be removed, and so matlab, like that is a very different thing. But this is a very different thing. So I think that in that sense, like these unrestricted spaces, abandoned spaces are more common sort of spaces.
Yeah, so I felt that the article actually was not really speaking about the commons, It was parks and gardens are not the commons. Um, you mentioned heat a few times, and in our little group at Gurukula, we've just been reading this news about heat waves and this like ridiculous temperatures in different parts of the world, and it's not just an ecological curiosity, the Dwarka or any place with vegetation. It's not just something that we can display our beautiful species and so on, but it is part of the, I hate to use the word infrastructure, but it's part of the condition of survival.
Hmm.
It is what is absolutely necessary in a city or in a landscape with those kind of they're going off the wall, the charts, the temperatures, that these are essential. And the question is not whether, to me, I was thinking as I was reading your piece earlier, whether Dwarka deserves to exist, but can Delhi afford to lose it? you
Exactly.
know if you're an ant on a cement sidewalk and there's a little leaf, you'll see this ant growing under the leaf if it's too hot. I myself will put out an umbrella when it's too hot. So you know what shade does. I mean, of course, people have crazy planting schemes and they want to do all sorts of things in the name of all this, right? But here is
Mhm.
something that is there, and it is actually changing the conditions of the land there for the benefit of everybody. To me, that is an inescapable kind of observation. Like, we have to look at that square in the face. Um, so can Delhi afford to lose its, wild places, self-made places, whatever you call them? So that was sort of, what I was thinking about. Do you want to just say that? Anything about that?
Well, Delhi can obviously Delhi cannot afford to lose such spaces, and even in the ecological sense, like see these spaces are very less disturbed. Like if we go to parks, there is a very different sort of disturbance there, not just because of people are visiting there, but because of the management sort of ideas. So imagine in Dwarka Forest, we have 65 bird species that have been noted there. But in public parks, you won't find my work, my internship work was in birds and urban parks only, and maximum species I found in regular public parks, not like Lodi Garden and all, some parks in Dwarka and some small parks, you will see not more than 27 species. So these spaces are like buffer zone sort of things where these species can come and live, and that's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the point goes into this question of, and I live in a very complex garden and absolutely love it. But, I know and understand that this kind of gardening or any kind of gardening is a process of directing succession and also perhaps arresting succession. If you have a lawn or if you have, nice, beautiful flowers and you don't allow the place, you
Mm.
allow such language, you allowing somebody else to do something. But so, I mean, though they cannot be, this very wild space cannot be equated to, say, I don't know, one of these beautiful parks in Delhi. But there is an ecological purpose and ambit to this that I think, would really need to recognize. So that brings me to this question, that so much of what you're talking about, it's like saying we are not seeing something absolutely wonderful that's happening. And, and so it's the politics of seeing also,
Yeah.
right? So that is the harder and more difficult question, because amongst, certainly in the kind of broader restoration community, these are very difficult questions. Like, we are so not into the invasives and so against, all this, and then so loving of these native landscapes and old biomes. I'm definitely very much, I've given a lifetime to that, but I have to recognize what nature, you know, is doing in any of these places or beyond these places. And the urban ecology is centerpiece in the ecological global question because it's a heat trap, and it's also, where millions, billions of people live, and most people in cities are actually on the marginal side. And where do they go to for water, for coolness, for recreation, for ecology? Yeah, so do you want to talk about that, the recognition
I,
part of it?
yeah, I think that we have been quite programmed to see nature in a certain way, particularly through restoration ideas and conservation ideas. So this doesn't let us see what we actually have right now. Mm. And that is also the reason that we do not want to study them actually at the first time. So, yeah, and I'm sorry,
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, just as a side, a personal comment, amongst my friends and all of us, we have so many beautiful pictures of all these wonderful, plants and animals and so on that are here in this tropical rainforest. But I have collected, I think I told you on a call that I've collected so many photographs of what's happening. Say, the moss arriving on the concrete, the fig bursting the wall, the tarmac in, roads, just where nothing is growing. This amazing plant is just like turned up there looking quite cocky, like really naughty. It's kind of like, I'm here and I'm going to solve this problem that nobody else seems to be doing anything about. Climate, well, shout out to me. So I'm with you in that, is what I want to say, Nirjesh. And I think there are many people who are open to this question of, life itself succeeding or doing its own thing. We have to sort of learn about it. And this research is very, very important. I think it's critical that we, even if we don't do the scientific research, that we
Hmm.
exchange these observations and understandings of what life is up to. It's an evolutionary bid for survival. And, do we know, what do we know about that really? So I think, at this point, it might be good to open the conversation to more people. Mandeep, how does that seem? Shall we, shall we go there and then we, come back?
Yeah,
Nirjesh?
that
Yeah.
yeah, we have a bunch of questions lined up, so maybe we can start taking them as well. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna read them out for you and then field them to one of you. Right. So first one is addressed to Nirjesh. Of course, it's from Pujan. And Nirjesh, Pujan thanks you for the presentation, first of all. And his question is that if Dwarka Forest is ecological, give me a second.
yeah, I can read the question though. I'll
Okay, sure. I'll just read it out for the sake of the
yeah, sorry.
participants anyway. So, I wanted to ask you if Dwarka Forest is ecologically real but institutionally invisible. Does the challenge lie less in conserving towards nature and more in recognizing what counts as nature? And I think a second question that he has is how should policy respond to ecosystems that emerge outside of our conventional categories of forest, wasteland, or even commons?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Poojan. So, yeah, it is ecologically real, and but yeah, true. It is institutionally invisible because in the legal ideas or in the definitional ideas of forest, there is uh, no consideration of these spaces because this sort of nature comes on its own on the land that has been planned for something else. So there is this idea of development which does not cater to the nature itself. So uh, I think that there is institutional gap in that sense because uh, because development is infrastructural development or something like that. And if that landscape is for a infrastructural development, then how can you save something like that? Because the ecological ideas that boats rely on are are not about spontaneous nature. They are about the nature that have been recorded uh, in the administrative record, something like that. And your second question, I think, how should policy respond to the jobs? This is a very difficult question to answer. That how should policy respond? I think that policy should respond uh, by understanding or by having more discussions on novel ideas of nature. And this can only be done when the ideas of nature that is coming from the environmental management take this into cognizance. Like novel, if ecologists do not take this novel ecosystem idea into cognizance, then this cannot be argued in the court then that this is something new that we have to look at in this direction. So the broader discourse of ecology is about some very different form of nature, and that spills into law. So I think that this policy discourse can only be changed when we, as ecologists, ourselves are more comfortable with these ideas of nature. That's it. I hope I answered.
Uh, Pujan, if you have a follow-up question, please feel free to ask. Meanwhile, Nirjesh, there's another one from you, from Gaurav. Have you found any presence of slash movement for biodiversity management committees or people's biodiversity registers mandated as per Biological Diversity Act of 2002 in and around the Dwarka Forest? And do you think such local self-government bodies could help in the fight for recognition of Dwarka Forest as urban commons?
Local self-government bodies are not there na, in urban areas. So how can they function? Because in urban villages, there is no idea of Gram Sabhas and Gram Panchayat. So there is no uh, local, as such, local bodies in these spaces. So that's the very political idea of the city that you do not have governance of that lower scale. So if there is no governance on lower scale, so how can this thing can be brought into the idea? So this question is quietly related to, I guess, the how administration works in urban contexts.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nirjesh. Just so I think a couple of months ago we had a guest come in on a webinar who was telling us how the Biological Diversity Act actually mandates that each panchayat has to have a biodiversity management committee. And I think Kerala seems to be doing that quite well in that sense. But I think it's a question of, as you said, the governance model,
Or yeah.
um, laws as one thing, but what's happening on ground would be different. But
Although
hmm,
that would be quite true for rural specific areas because they have these such local governance bodies. So in urban spaces, there is no, वो सब, मतलब they all have been dismantled. Uh, because they come in the city. There are still some government bodies, I guess, in Delhi, but they are also getting dismantled. There are few villages.
okay, it's quite
I
unfortunate.
think Bangalore has all this ward level action, no? So there's a lot of administrative stuff around ward level decision making in the city. And I think the lakes people have been in all the lakes conservation and all that that's going on and restoration is actually partly done at that level also, other than say other civic bodies. So there are some examples in the south of people utilizing some administrative structure on the government's part. So I know this from Environment Support Group, which has done a lot of work at that level in Bangalore.
Thanks for that, Suprabha. I think the next one is for you, definitely. Okay, let me read it out. This one is from Neha. And Neha asks, why do ecologists, environmentalists, and conservationists have to fight for conserving any ecosystem or landscape? Is it because we don't have strong voices in politics and economics, or whether decisions are just wait, is it because we don't have strong voices in politics and economics, or is it that those areas don't hold strong monetary value? Well, we can maybe start with the first one. Why do we have to fight for these spaces?
Are you asking me, Mandeep?
No, I'm just repeating Neha's
Ah,
question. But yeah, I
right.
think it's. I felt it was for you.
Why do we have to fight? Well, what are we not fighting about nowadays or at any point in time for, different groups of people? I think the fight over nature, or what's been considered fight over resources, is perhaps a pretty old fight. And with my own personal opinion is that, with a trillionaire circling the planet the way he is, that it's a very big fight. So I hope it's not a rhetorical question like, why do we have to fight? Because there are simply um, entities, let's say, that take up a very, very large space, while others, and especially a lot of people in India, don't have any space. So if it's not a fight, I don't know what it could be. What is the logical way in which we can actually make it possible to protect that which is giving us life, and that which is meaningfully connecting all of us to each other, and the planet. It's not just a policy level. I think it's much more than that. It's a much deeper question.
Thanks for that, Suprabha. Just a housekeeping request to everyone present. If you have questions, please use the QA panel. It's just getting slightly difficult for me to track questions if you're using the chat panel for questions. So I just request that if your question hasn't been taken yet, please drop them in the QA button. You should find it next to the chat button. Um, Meanwhile, I think we can, please give me a second. I think there's a nice one that I found in the chat. Uh, hmm. So we have one from Nikita Nirjesh. This one is for you. Nikita also thanks you for the presentation, and she asks if you think it's possible to conceptualize the idea of novel ecosystems in light of the cultural rights of marginalized communities.
Yeah, that's a very wonderful question. So, yeah, it could be visualized in the sense because when we were talking about urban ecosystems, so in urban ecosystems, there is an anthroposphere that directly impacts what sort of nature will take over. So it also depends if communities are going and interacting with the forest, like harvesting of timber. So this will lead to this might lead to a different succession sort of thing, where natural scape can go to a different ecological idea. So if I think, yeah, they in a very scientific sense, I think it would be very difficult to, as far as the idea of novel ecosystem is concerned. So they see novel ecosystems like novel ecosystems see landscapes without interventions of human beings. So there is a different idea of urban industrial landscape. So in urban industrial landscape, there is more weightage toward this argument that certain communities can also interact with it. So I think it would be important for novel ecosystem idea to like incorporate these rights uh, because maybe in terms of policy sense, they could be recognized. These rights could be recognized. I don't know, but it's a difficult question to answer.
Just a quick interjection, I think, Nirjesh. So, as a follow-up, Nikita asks this question in the context of extending the ethos of a law like the Forest Rights Act to urban areas. Does that help?
I guess Forest Right Act is also quite political in the sense that it also takes a lot of rights from people, because although the act seems quite good for people, but how it has been implemented, and so in that sense, I don't think if even if this thing is extended in the in the context of urban areas, it would produce same sort of inequalities in terms that people will not get rights, although on the papers there are rights.
There's a big frontline article today that I've just seen that's on Forest Rights Act, actually, and it not having moved much, it seems, in the last since it was, unleashed.
Thanks for that, Nirjesh and Suprabha. Very interesting one from Neha. So Neha says the majority of the plants growing in those abandoned areas are invasive species such as Lantana camara and Parthenium, and please forgive my pronunciation, Hysterophorus parthenium, basically, and many others. Could these plants be playing an invisible role in creating novel ecosystems? Because we often associate invasive plants with negative impact and major drivers of biodiversity loss. Suprabha, are you itching to answer this one?
I am, yeah, like, okay, do you have another hour kind of thing? Or why don't we all meet somewhere and we'll have a real chat and meet, in with Lantana Kamara in the room. So I would just like to say that I think it is the case that because of this enormous change at so many levels to the biosphere, that many plants which ordinarily would have existed in under other conditions because they have evolved with these other conditions cannot cope with these new conditions. I think the tendency is to blame the presence of invasives, to say that is why the native species cannot make it to these, they don't have a chance. But actually, if you turn the light on to what these plants are usually going towards, which is asphalt and cement and cities and smoke and pollution and urea and novel entities, you will see that they seem to be moving towards these conditions. Yes, they may also go into the old growth forests. They are very, very powerful. But actually, what they're doing is they're going towards these places where pollution, toxification, temperature changes, climatic changes, mineral changes, all this incredible sort of complexity of shifts that are happening now, they're going towards that. So I do feel very strongly that these novel ecosystems are responding, and I think Nirjesh covered this, are responding to the current state of the biogeosphere. And so they are part of meeting that condition because all plants are connected to certain conditions. And then when they go to those conditions, they change the conditions. Once they arrive somewhere, they change the conditions, and then other plants come. So we've never been around an old growth forest happening because that happened millions of years ago. But my contention is perhaps it would look a little bit like Dwarka, the beginnings of a forest. So what we are witnessing in Dwarka or other places is not a forest as a noun, but foresting is happening. It's a long evolutionary process with all these conditions that plants have to meet and are meeting. They are probing into these places. So that's how I like to, I not just like, I like to express it, but this is what has been very dear to me, to look at how plants are meeting these new conditions. Yes, there will be a lot of other stuff happening and we'll all be at war with that. But if we're not at war with this, I'm not sure what we're doing with asphalt and tar and cement and, roads and electric lines and airplanes.
Thanks, Suprabha, for that. Neha, for um, just if you're interested in exploring this further, Suprabha had the chance to explore her position in one of our older webinars on invasive species, where she goes in depth into what she just said. Um, we have a very interesting follow-up from Poojan, and I think it would be nice to hear from both of you this time. So the question is on novel ecosystems, and basically Pujan asks, if novel ecosystems persist and continue to provide ecological value, should restoration remain as our dominant paradigm for conservation in cities?
Sorry, say that again.
If novel ecosystems persist and continue to provide ecological value, should restoration remain our dominant paradigm for conservation in cities?
This should be very, I think I'll answer first. I think that this should be very context specific, even in like Aravali Biodiversity Park. So I think that restoring that landscape is not entirely bad, but we need to change our idea of, not just change our idea of restoration, but include some sort of neutrality towards invasive species when we are doing restoration. So I don't think that there should be any single dominant idea of doing nature in city. So, but there should be a context based on that. So we should like first assess it, because some landscapes, are not. So there are there is this. Historical forest, and in between there is a hybrid forest all thing, and then comes novel forest. So there are ecological assessments of knowing how a particular landscape, whether it is novel or it is hybrid. So if there is a hybrid ecosystem, then there are high possibilities of restoring it. And restoring is also very important because they also cater to very specific sort of species. So I think that they should go hand in hand, and they should be context specific rather than becoming a sort of discursive idea. That's what I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, I would recommend that you're in there for the long haul, and then that, that people are sort of grappling with things directly. And I think when you're a community or a group of people who are sort of seeing change, and then you're making these decisions on a day-to-day basis or year-to-year basis, I think there is that engagement itself is very, very important. And you will take the call then to say, okay, these guys, there's so many of these guys, these are so rare, why don't we bring them back? There's a chance, there's still a possibility. I think that comes from a very deep and long-term engagement, and I would definitely champion
So
that.
I also think that there's this wonderful writer, this evolutionary ecologist, Mano Shiltesian. So he wrote a book called Darwin Comes to Town. So he talks about cities in evolutionary perspective. So according to him, in the perspective of evolution of species, he talks about letting it grow and splendid isolation. So in splendid isolation, he's taking a very evolutionary idea. There are some species they should be like isolated in order to maintain the gene pool and something like this, and some species, some particular landscape should be given to like let it grow, like Dwarka Forest that is growing on its own. So in that evolutionary sense, I guess these two takes like of isolation, like taking it back to something and of letting it grow. So both work. So you can read more about it. Uh, that book called Darwin Comes to Town. So it gives you more idea of like whether it is quite isolated or it should be like something just leaving on its own to like grow.
Thanks for that, Nirjesh and Suprabha. I think, yeah, what you said about, not having a dominant idea, I think it's quite important. I just wanted to do a quick time check with the both of you. I think we have a few more questions, and seeing that it's, past an hour, I wanted to know if you would have time to stick around for those few more questions, or does it?
Yeah, yeah, I think we can go at till 7:30 or something. If there are a few questions, then we can complete.
Suprabha?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so we have one from Vinita, and she asks, in the absence of such large accessible wild spaces in our cities, can parks play such a role too? And I'm assuming this, Vinita, if you could, I'm assuming that the question here is about commons, but Vinita, please feel free to come in and clarify if I have not understood this correctly. And you should be able to speak now if uh, there's a clarification.
Yes, I was referring to commons increasingly because within the city one doesn't necessarily find such always find such large uh, wild spaces.
Got it. Thanks for that. Nirjesh, would you like to take that?
I think it is very difficult to say there are very less spaces like these in city because we haven't assessed them only. Because there are lots of in urban spaces, there are lots of land parcels that are left for future development. So when they are left, then these sort of nature develops. So there is no record of these spaces. So it is very difficult to say that these are very less. So I see that these spaces are so much in our urban spaces.
Yeah, Vinita, I was in Bangalore during the lockdown, the first one, and I was there for 8 months, locked in one part of the city up with my mother when I normally live in Kerala, and every chance I got to walk, I walked, in parts of that area, and just discovered so much life, and not Lalbagh, not Kaban Park, not the usual parks, but all these lots, these housing lots, and parts of places like Nimhans has a huge compound, which actually people living there who work in these big apartments and so on, they actually need those spaces, and there's so much there. And so I feel that it is, to discover the city through the living beings who actually really make it the city, make it even livable. So the question is habitability is going to be the question. It's not only biodiversity and wild, but the very habitability of a city. So if city planning is not taking on these major ecological questions when they can take on other things, amusement centers and malls and flyovers and so on, this is a serious gap in ecological understanding.
Vinita, I see you have a follow-up. Would you like to come online again and just clarify?
Yeah, what I meant was uh, not that we don't have spaces. I think in terms of they are there, but for the majority of outdoor workers, for people whose work is on the streets, it is these parks, in the middle of their, for gig workers, for auto drivers, for all of them, it is these parks that are easily accessible. And so it was just a question in terms of, uh, you know, can we relook at the parks that we have as such spaces?
You mean as novel ecosystems?
Yes.
Ah. Nirjesh, you should take that.
I think that see, there should not be for a patch of land to be categorized or called as novel ecosystem. There should be very least management sort of things in these spaces. So in parks, there is huge amount of management. See, there are grasses and there are so many malis who will take care of the trees, who will cut the trees, who will remove the spontaneous vegetation. So that is not the idea of novel ecosystem. Novel ecosystem is very so if it can become a novel ecosystem if we leave that particular park to let it grow. So then it will take on itself. Then it can be qualified as novel ecosystem. But park as a category in terms of management, it is very difficult to put it in that category because there is lot of management involved. And novel ecosystems, they grow on their own.
And they require a lot of water, many of these parks.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Vinita says thank you. There's a nice comment from Pradeep. By his admission triggered by Nirjesh's photo of a Neil guy. Pradeep, would you like to come online and and just express yourself? You, Praveen, wait, sorry, Pradeep. You should be able to speak now if you'd like. Wait, have
I
I? Wait, I think I have
sorry,
unmuted
it
the
did.
wrong person. I'm just confused. This is Pradeep. Zoom is just throwing
No,
me off.
you've unmuted me.
Have I unmuted the right person though?
Can you? Yes,
Okay.
it was my
Please go ahead.
comment, so I'm assuming
Apologies.
that. Yeah. Hi, Supi. Thank you for this link. I surprised myself by actually joining, and thank you, Nirjesh, because Dwarka was actually something that used to be on my way from old Rajendra Nagar to uh, Dawla, behind the old Pusa Institute Road. So it was insights into a past. But I was just thinking that I won't read my comment. It's there, and people are welcome to it. But I was just thinking that what um, what both of you to some degree responded to this question about whether parks could become, um, let's just say, natural habitats, right? Um, and it's not possible because of the amount of management that takes place. And I was just thinking about 39 years ago, Supi actually came and did one hillock, right? That we got the community saying that they would not allow grazing, etc., to take place. And she did with another colleague of mine from that village, a species count. And then a year later, right, the number of species had actually increased, right, apart from the actual physical quantity. So I think a condition for commons, especially in urban areas, to move into forests requires that humans keep their hands off it, right? And in the absence of that, what you have is manicured grass, nice colorful plants, etc. Very human centric, but not an ecology. Yeah. So let me just stop with that, Mandeep.
Thanks.
Hello. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Pradeep. Thanks for that. I think, Nirjesh, there was a question on the report, whether is there somewhere that I don't remember who asked this, but is there somewhere that people can get the report that you've authored?
Yeah. I have shared that screen, that QR code, right? I'll just share the link with you in the message
Okay,
section.
we can maybe share it with the attendees.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can take one more. And okay, so there's one from Chetan. I'm going to read it out. One thing that's very interesting that comes out is the lack of historical interaction or intimacy with the forest and nearby communities. Since it is evolved recently have you understood or mapped the inspirations or thoughts of these communities? A thought before our conservation agenda takes surface. And the question is for you, Nirjesh.
Yeah, I've as far as given the amount of funding I had tried to gauge that perspectives, and that is in the report. So, but I think that that is not a true picture of what people think about it, because there are very less interviews. So, it's a very primary sort of thing, I can say.
Okay. Thanks for that, Nirjesh. I think also we just lost Suprabha. But I think we are at the end of the questions anyway. So we can maybe close. Nirjesh, first of all, my apologies. I totally forgot to credit Naveen as well from the team. And thank you so much to you and Naveen and to the rest of your team for fighting the fight to save Dwarka Forest. I remember reading it on the news when the court declined to recognize it as a forest, citing its prosopis population. But the court may have disagreed with you, but we'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the effort that went into making the case to conserve this forest. Secondly, thank you. I don't know if Suprabha is here, but thank you to you and Suprabha for sharing some very interesting ideas today, especially in the age of heat waves and heat islands and failing monsoons. I think you've raised a very pertinent question about access to ecosystem services. And I was just thinking, there's sections of the climate mitigation crowd that are talking about the right to cool now, the right to have access to cooling mechanisms as heat waves get out of hand. And our cities are not equipped to handle them at all. Not everybody can afford air conditioning. So very pertinent thought there. And in light of that reality, I think in the age of climate change, and in light of the theoretical gaps that you've highlighted, and in light of the privilege gaps that exist in our society, I wonder if the ecology and the conservation camp they they need to view these ecosystems more kindly. There are sections of these groups that already do, but I believe that needs to happen more on a more widespread scale now. I hope we can continue to have this conversation with our ecologist colleagues and with our community, with the rest of our ERA community. And thank you so much for joining us and for making the time. And to the participants that have stuck around till now, thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today and for all your interesting questions. Good evening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks for coming
Bye
on.
bye.